2.4 million people behind bars, the United States reportedly incarcerates more people than any other country. According to a recent Supreme Court ruling, overcrowding is creating unsafe, unsanitary, and violent conditions, while medical and mental health care is being compromised. So how did we get here? Why are so many U.S. citizens in prison? Over the last 40 years, the prison population in the U.S. has risen by 700%. This is largely due to changes in drug sentencing laws that started in the 1970s. The zero-tolerance narcotic policies resulted in a dramatic increase in prison numbers. Nearly half of federal inmates and 16% of state inmates are locked up on drug-related charges. Long sentences and mandatory minimums are also a factor. Many states have variations on the three strikes law where repeat offenders automatically receive life sentences for their third felony. Rules have stayed in place despite studies showing that longer prison sentences and higher incarceration rates have little effect on reducing crime. These policies disproportionately affect minorities. According to the NAACP, about 58% of the male prison population is made up of African Americans and Hispanics, yet these minorities make up only a quarter of the American population. Racial minorities are more likely to be arrested and convicted, and once convicted, they often face harsher sentencing than their white counterparts. A more recent development affecting prison overcrowding has been the growing number of privatized institutions. For-profit companies now run many prisons in the U.S. These companies are typically contracted by the government on the strength of affirmations that they will uphold the rights and welfare of inmates, all while saving taxpayers' money. However, a 2013 report from the Anti-Privatization Group in the Public Interest recently investigated these prison contracts. Out of a total of 62 contracts, more than half had quotas stating that prisons must have an 80 to 100% occupancy at all times. If the state and local governments fail to meet the quota, they often pay thousands, sometimes millions in taxpayer money for unused beds, which means it's in the state's interest to keep prisons full, regardless of whether or not crime rates are falling. According to the report, Louisiana, for example, is locked into prison contracts with some of the highest occupancy quotas in the country, earning the nickname of the world's prison capital. It's reported they have an incarceration rate nearly 5 times Iran's and 13 times China's. This is partially because in addition to private companies, Louisiana sheriffs are reportedly also profiting off of prisoners. In the early 1990s, the state encouraged sheriffs to build more local jails in order to reduce overcrowding. In return, they would receive cash incentives. Now, according to the Times-Picayune, there are more inmates in local jails than in state prisons, despite the fact that the state offers better reentry programs. Overcrowding has been exacerbated by the lack of a nationwide mental illness support system. The deinstitutionalization of mental health care in the 60s and 70s left many patients with nowhere to go. Now, more than half of the prison population is made up of those with a history of mental health problems. Most experts agree that major prison reforms are needed on a state and national level, and programs have attempted to rebalance drug sentencing laws. But as long as prisons are still working on a for-profit model, companies and states will benefit from arresting and detaining U.S. citizens. Although it's different in every state, the death penalty is still a hotly debated issue. Check out this video from our friends at DNews to learn more.
All right, let me get my levels together. All right, I want to welcome y'all to episode 14. We're going to be talking about private prison system today, and I got a special guest co-host with me. So I'm going to introduce him. I want y'all to be patient with me today because I have a lot of information. So I want y'all to be patient, and I want y'all to take notes because this is going to be real important. So Paul, if you could go to dual screen, please, so I can introduce my co-host.
You got it.
All right, Bully, can you introduce yourself to the viewers? Let them know.
What's up, y'all? Bully, man. So I'm in the entertainment field. I'm a promoter slash artist, just entertainment all around. I've had prior experiences in the prison system, and me and Wiley go way back, man. So I was more than happy to come on here and share some firsthand experiences with you.
Right, and that's one of the big reasons why I brought you on the show today, is because I value your opinion first and foremost, right? I feel like you're a very insightful brother, and I've known you for 20 years, so I know that everything that you say, that you're saying it from the heart, and you're saying it from a place of truth, right?
Appreciate that.
And I watch your growth as a person over the years, right? When you see somebody and you know them from the hood, and then you watch them change their life for the better, right? That's a motivation, right? So you always want to be, you always want to work with people like that. So I'm glad that you took the opportunity to come on the show. I really appreciate it, and we're gonna get into it.
So
So
love, bro.
one of the first things I want to do to bring everybody up to speed on what we're going to be talking about today is the private prison system. What is private prisons, right? A lot of us know prisons in the general form, right? We know you get locked up, you go to jail, right? But private prisons is something a little bit different, right? Because now we're locking people up for profit. It's not necessarily locking people up for rehabilitation purposes, right? We're locking people now because it's generating income.
Right.
And one of the things that I talked about in one of the earlier episodes is how everything revolves around the aspect of business, right? So when we get into what is the business model of private prisons, I'm going to go into this short article real quick, and I'm just going to give people a brief introduction of what is a private prison. So this article right here is called The Business Model of Private Prisons. The U.S. prison system incarcerates approximately 2.3 million people as of 2020. These prisoners are there for a multitude of different crimes, ranging from drug possession and petty larceny to grand theft auto and murder. With that many people in prison, there needs to be plenty of prisons to house the inmates. This has given rise to the private or for-profit prison system. So in this next paragraph, I'm going to highlight the main differences between privately owned prisons and publicly owned prisons, and then we're going to go back and forth with a discussion. The private prison system raises a lot of questions. One that many people wonder about is how can a private company legally incarcerate people? Isn't that the government's job to house and hold prisoners? The answer is yes, but the government does contract out quite a bit of their work. A public prison is one that is completely owned by the government. This means that they have to provide the prison building, staff the guards and administration, and oversee all of the prisoners and everything that happens inside the prison. Even with a public prison, many of the services are outsourced to private contractors such as food service, cleaning service, and maintenance. With a private prison, many of the burdens are taken off the government and put onto a private company. Instead of all the business that goes along with running a prison, the government simply has to supply the prisoners and oversee the prison. Now that begs the question of how a for-profit prison makes money, right? So this is a question that I'm going to pose to the viewers and I'm going to pose to the panel, Paul, Willie. What do you see could be the moral implications of having a prison, right, that's built strictly for the process of a profit instead of rehabilitation?
I think off top when you think about pretty much benefiting from both ends, because that's pretty much what it is. I think more of like a conflict of interest as far as, you know, as a private business, your main concern is the bottom line, right, which is to make money. But for real, a prison system is made to rehabilitate. And rehabilitation costs money. That's not free. You have to pay the proper staff to come in here and actually pay attention to the human beings that you're locking up. With my point is that it costs a lot of money in order to rehabilitate a large population of people within the prison system. So when that happens now, you start to question if you should spend more money for the better of this person, or should you cut costs in order to profit? So off top right there, that's a major conflict of interest, you know, if you're benefited from both ends.
Absolutely. Paul, what's your perspective on prison for profit?
Well, everything they try to, they like have the grassroots, the quote unquote, the grassroots foundations of things and publicly funded things don't ever do as good as a job as a privately owned establishment would put, you know, try to get that goal done. If it's utilized correctly, and, you know, an example of profit in prison would be, I guess, like if these people are working in a warehouse making license plates. They're getting paid to do it, but it costs more money for someone, another factory that's not in basically legalized slaves doing the work. Is that money being saved in helping rehabilitate these people?
No, it's
Is
not.
is there private funds like when you get out, Well, we have a program, and it's funded through the fact that they are doing this work,
Right.
you know, and give them a tech trade or something that they can do when they get out back in society. Is the money being utilized in that? Probably not. So it's a gift and a curse at the same time.
Right.
That's
So let's take a moment and let's look at exactly how private prisons make money, right? Because a big misconception is that, you know, the government is the one that take care of the housing process and the food and the maintenance of these prisoners, and that's not necessarily the case. It was like that at one point, and then there was a transition to the privatizing of the prison system, and it was touched on a lot of the topics that you guys touched on. You know, the cutting costs, right? The conflict of interest is there, and we're gonna look at how they make money off of this. Okay, how a private prison makes money. A public prison is naturally nonprofit. The end goal is to house prisoners in an attempt to rehab them or remove them from the streets. A private prison, on the other hand, is run by a corporation. That corporation's end goal is to profit from anything they deal in. And this goes on what you were saying. The bottom line is profit, right? In order to make money as a private prison, they receive a stipend, or another word is an allowance, right? From the government. This money from the government can be paid in a multitude of different ways. It can be based on the size of the prison, based on a monthly or yearly set amount, or in most cases, it is paid based on the number of prisoners that the prison houses. So let me give y'all an example of how they break down the cost per year per inmate. Let's suppose that it costs $100 per day to house a prisoner, and the prison can hold 1,000 inmates. A private prison can offer their services to the government and charge $150 per day per prisoner. Generally speaking, the government will agree to these terms if the $150 is less than if the prison was publicly run. That spread is where the private prison makes money. So, again, it costs $100 to house a prisoner, right?
yep.
Let's say to house that prisoner, it would run the state about $175, right? If the state was to run it. Well, this contracting company is now in the picture, and they can offer it to you. We can run your jail for $150. Now the state is looking at it like they're saving the $25, right? They're looking at it like they're saving $25.
Yep.
The contractors, they're making $50, right? Because the general cost to run a prisoner is only $100. This is just a sample number.
Yeah, that's a sample number.
But
absolutely.
they're using the $100 as their standard, right? So you can see that there's an incentive to have the prisons full because each body is an asset for the corporation, right? Let me continue on a little bit. And this is exactly what you were saying. As in any business, saving money whenever possible increases the bottom line. Expanding also allows the business to bring in more money, but it needs capital to do that, right? So my experience with prison was always in the state institution, right? And with state institutions, most of these state institutions are still run by the state. It was I want to say like in the early 1990s where Ohio made the transition to privately funded institutions. Like I think the company was called MTX. They were a company based out of Texas, and they bought the North Coast facility. I believe they bought the Lake Erie facility, and it was one more facility that they bought. And now all three of these facilities are privately owned, right? And there was a change in the what's the word I want to use? In the sentencing law, right? You remember when they had the 3 to 5?
Guidelines.
They had the sentencing guidelines there. They went with 3 to 5 years or the 3 to 11, right? They came out with the whole concept of mandatory time, right? And the mandatory time
minimums.
Yeah, it was like a backdoor 3 strikes law to where, you know, if you got 2 priors, right, you become an MDO, major drug offender, and you get hit with the maximum sentence, right? And all these were designed to make sure that these prisons would stay full now. Because before 311, if you were on good behavior, you'd be out after 2 years, right? And there's no incentive there. The state wants to get you out of here as quick as possible. So judicial releases and all these things were more available to the prisoner back then. With the IOP programs and things like that. Now they don't do all of that. Now when you go to jail, they hit you with maximum sentence, mandatory time, and they make sure that you're in this facility for an extended
amount of time, so they can profit off it.
So if you want to tell the viewers your brief your experience when you went through the system, what was your experience going through the system, and how were you able to overcome it?
All right, well, I've been through both systems. You know, I've been in the state and I've also been in the federal system. Um, and you know, to something that Paul was speaking about, where he was like, you know, these jobs that are presented to inmates in order for us to make money while we're in there. But that's the problem, you know, when they're paying people that's incarcerated in here 10 cents a day. I mean, pennies for a whole day. And you expect people to come home and do something different. I don't think that's a good way of setting people up for success. If
Right.
anything, you're using them, you're exploiting their current situation in order to maximize your profits.
Right.
Because that's something we used to always speak about as being incarcerated in there. We used to be like, you know what, if some of these jobs in here actually paid a decent wage, at least let's just say the minimum wage. You know, you able to at least save some money, send some money out, help it with your kids while you in there. But when you in there, they don't try to offer you any of that. They try to offer you the pennies.
And I think a lot of that is by design. You know,
Absolutely.
when you have a system that relies on a quota system, right, to make sure that the prisons stay filled, there's no incentive to make you a better man or woman, right? There's no incentive. They need you to come home
And come back.
in a state of criminality to where you can commit another crime and come right back in, and they could get paid again. So this is how this works, right? And there's a lot of things. There's a lot of other things involved with this, but I mean, money is, you know, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? So this is a situation where, you know, like the video, like the opening video stated, 50% of the inmates are in there with mental health problems that are not getting addressed,
Absolutely.
right? And now we could debate about what is considered a mental health or not, but there's a lot of people in there that are just simply in there because they're poor, right? So when we start addressing the illness, right, the symptom of mass incarceration will start to disappear. And this is one of the things that we could do, right? Before I go on, I want to show people this. I want to share this part of the article right here because this is important. This establishes why private prisons are big business. Why would a private prison need to be publicly traded? As a business grows, it can make a choice to go public. Essentially, this does a few things for the company that it can't do as a privately held business. With most businesses, exposure is the key to growth. The more people that know about the company, the more sales they can do. However, with a private prison, exposure isn't something they really need. Instead, they need capital boost for two other reasons. If a private prison can mark up a prisoner $50 per day, that means their prison can theoretically earn $50,000 per day on a prison that houses, 1,000 inmates. If they can land another contract with the government to build a prison in the neighboring state, they could start earning an additional $50,000 per day by maxing out on that prison. By going public, they can see a sudden influx of money that will allow them to build that second prison. Still, there is even a seedier reason to go public for a private prison. In order to stay in business, these prisons need a constant stream of inmates coming in to replace those that have served their sentence. This means that laws have to be enforced, contracts renewed, and in some cases, laws more strictly enforced. To do so, they have to buy politicians. This process is called lobbying and is often frowned upon. So this is deep, right? These private prisons, they go on the public market to get an influx of capital, right? And this capital that the stockholders put into these companies allows them to build more prisons.
Word.
So now, let's say a company like MTX. MTX is the company that runs the private prisons here in Ohio, right? Now MTX gets a contract. They see how much money. Let's say the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections is looking over Ohio's Department of Corrections, and they see, wow, they saved a lot of money this year on switching to private prisons, right? Now, Pennsylvania Department of Corrections goes out to MTX and be like, can you build a prison here for us, right? But in order to make sure that prison's full, they also have to make sure the laws correspond to a high level of criminal activity, right? And when we go back 2 episodes, we could look at how the Jim Crow laws and these black codes were all enforced, right?
Redlining.
Yeah, private prisons is not as new as we think it is. So real quick, I want to touch on the history of the private prison industry, how it evolved from plantation labor to what it is now. The source article for this particular is Time Magazine. They are the source for this. And this article is called "The True History of America's Private Prison Industry." Before founding the Corrections Corporation of America, a 1.8 billion private prison corporation now known as CoreCivic, Terrell Don Hutto ran a cotton plantation the size of Manhattan. There were mostly black convicts were forced to pick cotton from dawn to dusk for no pay. It was 1967 and the Beatles' All You Need Is Love was a hit, but the men in the field sang songs with lyrics like "Old Master, don't you whip me, I'll give you $50." Hutto's family lived on the plantation and even had a houseboy, an unpaid convict who served them. At the time, most prisons in the South were plantations. In some states, certain inmates were given guns and even whips and empowered to torture those who didn't meet labor quotas. Hutto did such a good job in Texas that Arkansas would hire him to run their entire prison system made entirely of plantations, which he would run at a profit to the state. His ability to run a prison that put money into state coffers would later attract the attention of two businessmen with a new idea: to found a corporation that would run prisons and sell shares on the stock market. So that's deep, right? The modern system of private prisons was modeled after the plantation system from slavery. They even used the same plantations, right? So, when you was in there, what is the mindset do you see of a lot of the inmates that you see in there? I know for me personally, a lot of them seem lost, right? A lot of them seem like this was the only life that they had for them. You know, I would talk to a lot of the dudes, we'd be in the yard, and a lot of dudes was more worried about what their woman was doing back home, or where the next dice game was at, or who had, who had, they never really evolved past that, that slave mentality, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to touch on briefly, like, your experiences in there, like some of the people that you meet. Did you see that slave mentality manifest, or did you see, a different type of individual?
In my experience, I've seen both, right? I think a big misperception when it comes to prison is like everybody in there is just like up to no good, and they're just in there doing whatever, sleeping their day away. And that's true. There is a percentage of the population when that happens. In the federal system, I was also exposed to a percentage of the prison population that was into building. They was in there looking up how to start businesses, how to write business plans in order to get approved for business loans coming out of prison, specifically targeting felons coming out. I met dudes that had nothing but hope in their eyes and still do. Just today I got a message from one of my guys in there, man, and he was just like, yo, 17 months left, I'm almost there. And that just right there just reminds me the difference in mentality that we in there have compared to the people out here. See, out in there, time flies for us. It goes by so fast that we look at time like this. Out here, some people complain about a week. They be like, damn, 30 days, man. Like, this is taking forever.
Right.
But in there, 30 days feel like a week if you keeping yourself busy.
Right.
But in there, I seen it all, man. I've seen guys waste their time, and I've seen guys come out of there way better than what they did. And fortunately for me, I always fell in line with the guys that was looking to be better people. You know what I mean? And we would build and we would take from each other and we would check each other and understand that, there's lines and boundaries to anything. Everything in the world should have some boundaries, even in the criminal underworld. We still have a certain code of ethics that we stick to. That's why the Tekashi 6ix9ine is frowned upon. That's why you get guys on here air people's business out. People still make an uproar about these things because there's still a code of ethics that goes with anything in life.
Absolutely.
So in there, like I said, I would fall in line with a lot of dudes that had the same goals in mind. We wanted better. We didn't want to be back in prison. And in the process, you would try to pick up some of the guys by the wayside that was like lost, but you felt like they had potential.
Right.
So you would always stop and holler at the little homie over there that was maybe getting too high, or maybe was always fighting, or maybe was involved in some BS, and see a little bit of yourself in them.
Right.
And be able to say, hey, little homie, come here, let me holler at you, man. Like, there's different ways to approach the situation.
Because that's one of the things, like when it comes to rehabilitation, that's a process of self-responsibility, right? There's no external source that can make you a better man. That has to be a choice that comes from within, right? So, these prisons, they're built with the concept, with the idea that, hey, we're going to lock you up and take you away from your family, and that's going to make you a better man. But for a lot of people, it makes them worse individuals, right? They become accustomed to living without their family. They become accustomed to living without their children and their loved ones. And they become accustomed to going in and out of the prison doors. And this is where you say that people become institutionalized, right? So, me personally, that was one thing, I've always been in and out of prison since I was 15, right? I was one of these kids that I had a lot of potential and I wasted it, right? Because I chose the streets because the streets gave me instant gratification. It took me 2-3 weeks to read a book. And, the knowledge that I would have got from that book would have served me infinitely better. But, having that money in my pocket from making that transaction felt good right there.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you follow, and we're going to, towards the end of the show, we're going to touch on how, music and things like this influence this criminal behavior. But, a lot of these things that we need to take upon ourselves are the self-responsibility of fixing ourselves. And, I think that's one thing that we have the opportunity to do now, right? We're better men because of these mistakes that we made, right?
Absolutely.
So now we're able to go to our children, right? We're able to go to our peers, our contemporaries, and be like, yo, there's another way that you could survive out here that doesn't involve you becoming a modern day slave, right? Like I touched on last week in the show about the drug war, subconsciously or not even subconsciously, but subtly, us participating in this criminal game, we're helping the police prosper, right? Because we're giving them job security, right? As long as we out here committing crimes, right, and not taking care of our families and breaking the law, we giving the police job security because they always know they're gonna have a certain group of people that they can always lock up. We keeping these stocks, we're keeping these jails open, right? And this is all something that we got the power to stop if we just, focus on building better versions of ourselves, focusing on the family, stop letting celebrities and things that really don't have no substance influence us, right? I'm gonna go on a little bit more about the history. Prisons have been privatized before. Louisiana first privatized its penitentiary in 1844, just 9 years after it opened. The company, Manhattan, Pratt and Ward, ran it as a factory, using inmates to produce cheap clothes for enslaved people. One prisoner wrote in his memoir that as soon as the prison was privatized, his jailers laid aside all objects of reformation and reinstated the most cruel tyranny to eke out the dollar and cents of human misery. Much like Core Civic shareholder reports today, Louisiana's annual penitentiary reports from the time give no information about prison violence, rehabilitation efforts, or anything about security. Instead, they deal almost exclusively with the profitability of the prison, right? So I was fortunate, my first bid was I was a little bit younger, right? So they had sent me to an institution that was a little bit more wild and rambunctious, right? I was young, so they put me with the younger guys. So, for that bid, the majority of the time it was spent like, fighting and, just trying to survive. And then, I caught my second bid when I was a little bit older, and that bid was a little bit more calm. I was a little bit older, and I found myself around the older inmates because I was at that point where I ain't got time for this, If you could briefly touch on what you've seen as far as security, do you feel like these private prisons offer like a better security, a safer environment for the inmates? Like, I mean, you hear stories all the time of riots and inmates getting stabbed by other inmates, right? And a lot of these prisons is at the private prisons where this is happening. So I don't know if the institution you was at was it private? Do you know if it was private or public?
The holding facility, the federal holding facility I was in was a private jail. It's not even a prison. It's a holding facility. It's a federal holding facility.
Did you see like a difference in the security?
I would say I find a difference in the services offered. In the federal system, once you get into the federal system, they have a lot more to offer you. You know, I actually seen, I'm not going to say prisons, I'm going to say one I seen that actually offered college courses.
Okay.
It also offered you the opportunity to get a real high school diploma. You know, you could do high school diploma, GED, and there was college courses there. But that was one of very, very, few. Like, you know what I mean? If not, maybe one of three or something like that. But, you know, seeing a lot of these things inside this prison and seeing the lack of resources with the amount of money that these prisons generate,
Right.
you know, it's a shame, man, because it's like I feel like they can really, really contribute to help some of these guys do better in life, and they choose not to. And I'm real big on accountability too, man. I'm the type that you should you do the crime, you do the time.
Right.
You know, if you decide to be out here and put yourself out here in any
Absolutely.
situations that you know your freedom is at risk and you still decide to do so, then you deserve whatever comes with it.
Absolutely.
All right. So once in there now, you have to decide for yourself what you want to continue to do. You want to go down this path or you want to try something different.
Right.
And I just feel like for the person that's setting that fork in the road, it should be more resources for that person. And I think you would get a lot more that come out of there a whole lot better than what they did. But for the lack of resources, they're frustrated. So that frustration leads back to what? Same old behaviors they
Right.
was used to. They're going to keep doing the same things they've been doing because nobody's offering them a better option.
Absolutely. And that's really important what you're saying, accountability, right? So like just because I'm here making a show exposing how private prisons are for profit, that doesn't mean go out there and commit a crime
No,
or that I'm
absolutely
endorsing
not.
crime. We're just trying to explain to you how the system is rigged. And by you going out there participating in crime, you're adding to the profits that they make, right?
Absolutely.
When you could simply just find another way, you know? And I know it's easy for us to say in retrospect, right, after we made the mistakes, but that's what the men are supposed to do, right? Or the older women in the community are supposed to do. They're supposed to take their experience and they're supposed to teach those that haven't went to the experience and prevent them from making the same mistakes. So one thing I wanted to touch on is who are these people, right? Who exactly are these people that are buying these prisons, right? And investing money into these prisons, right? Because this money has to come from somewhere,
Yeah.
right? So this particular article is titled "People Owning Shares in Both Rap Production and Private Prisons Encourage Crime for Profit." So now I'm going to segue the show into what is influencing society, most notably in the urban communities, to commit these crimes to begin with, right? Because it's not in our nature. I know I'm Puerto Rican. I wasn't born to commit crime, right? And I know most African American people, their moms didn't raise them to grow up and commit crimes, right? So why is crime perceived as rampant in our communities, right? Because we seem to be the only ones going to jail for this.
It's fucking glorified, excuse my language, but I'm sorry, it is what it is. Like,
Exactly.
it's all part of the social engineering that we talked about in the very first episode.
Absolutely. So, Corrections Corporation of America buys state prisons as long as they remain at a minimum 90% full. So that actually encourages incarceration, doesn't it? After a spate of shootings and with a rising murder rate, the police here are saying gangster rap is contributing to the violence, luring gang members and criminal activity to nightclubs. Prison companies rely on social engineering, as well as police, lawyers, and judges, and planting drugs on people to bring them inmates and remain lucrative. The companies that simultaneously own shares in both prisons and music production convince susceptible populations that violence is necessary in order to survive. People need to feel a part of their culture, and if violence is seen as a glamorous part of that particular culture, such as in the post-mid-90s popular hip-hop and rap that now glorify rape, prostitution, drugs, murder, and assault, it actually imparts a cool status in the neighborhood, right? So what the writer of this article is trying to say is that human beings are naturally influenced by their culture, right? Culture is the influence of certain beliefs and ideas that it has on a culture. And if we look back at Latin culture, if we look back at African American culture, and from a historical viewpoint, shooting guns and women walking around with no clothes was never part of our culture, right? That was introduced to our culture, right? And when was it introduced in our culture? It was introduced in our culture when they realized that we were trying to create something that was going to have a voice, most notably hip hop, right? If you look at early hip hop music, if you look at the music that was coming out at this time, it was all about self empowerment, right? It was all about,
Poverty,
pro-black, poverty, what's going on, right? Overcoming oppression and things like that. And then over time, it gradually started to take a shift into something else,
Yeah.
right? And it went away from that idea of self-empowerment more to the gangster rap genre that we have now, the trap music, the drill music, right? And there's no coincidence that as the music changed, so did our neighborhoods, right? The clothing that the males started to wear became more feminine, right? Fights were no longer things that happened in the neighborhood. Now people were dying over simple arguments. Back in the day, you had a disagreement with somebody, come outside, let's go punch each other in the face, and it's over with. You shake hands and you move on with the rest of the day. Now, you get in an argument with somebody because you looked at them wrong, and they'll shoot you dead, and your life is over now, right? And the music that's out here now glorifies that. Now, I want you to change hats for a minute, right? And I want you to put your artist hat, and I want you to give me your perspective as an artist about when you did music. Were you consciously aware of the lyrics that you made or was it just something that you were just give me your perspective as an artist? How did you approach the music making process?
What's crazy that the whole influence of music on our culture is kind of like a crazy, like, it's a blurry line, because at the end of the day, even though it influences our culture, it comes from the culture being oppressed for so many years. When people are constantly seeing nothing but violence, nothing but poverty, nothing but minimal ways in order to survive on a daily basis, I mean, naturally, that's what you're going to speak about. If you live behind white picket fences and you went to a nice school and everything, I'm sure that's what you would be speaking about. So at the end of the day, even in the beginning of time, even with hip hop, man, when people, when they made that shift, I don't think nobody, well, maybe the powers that be, maybe saw it as a way and exploited it, but I don't think nobody in the direct circle of the hip hop pioneers said, let's change the narrative to this.
Right.
I think it was just more the artist influenced by the environment. And naturally, it led to speaking about things that they were seeing on a daily basis. Then, of course, you got your people from the sidelines just watching and saying they seeing it and writing about it. But I'm talking about the people that had a huge influence out the box, out the gate. I feel like it was just naturally what they seen on a day-to-day, so they spoke about it.
Right.
And in turn, maybe unintentionally or intentionally, who knows, they shifted the narrative into what it is now. It's like you said, correct. When hip hop first started, it was about having a good time.
Yeah.
It was partying, Sugar Hill Gang, hip hop, hippity hop, and all that. It was just a fun vibe. It was when people freestyle, they freestyled about, I was walking to the store getting the juice and all that. You know what I memean? But then naturally, like I said, as the times change, because if you notice, it has a direct correlation with the time that the crime rate went up around New York City. Remember, New York City is the mother of it. So around that time when hip hop took a turn in narrative, was when the crime rate was rising. So in turn, what are you getting? Artists out of these volatile environments speaking on what they seeing on a daily basis. Now, what popular culture did with it, they ran with it and said, this is cool. That was on them, but I don't think, like I said, I don't think it was any one person that said, "Oh, I'm gonna make it about violence and shaking ass all the time." This is just what I'm saying. This is what I'm writing about. And as an artist perspective, as I was younger, I never paid attention to the content of my lyrics because I was literally just writing about what I went about my day, which was unfortunately what led me to prison: drugs, violence, women,
Absolutely.
Et cetera, et cetera. I think as I got older and my daughter got older, I think I started paying attention to certain words I used. But man, I feel like music is an expression of self, and to limit somebody and how they want to express themselves would be like limiting an artist from only painting on half of the page.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So that's very insightful. I've never been in the music scene, but I've worked around people that have over the years, and One thing that I noticed that it really started changing around the Biggie and Tupac era, right? Where they were creating this dialectic East and West Coast, right? And that was the first sign of the red flag that something, because back in the day, like he was saying, it was just you get your battle, you get your dance crew, and y'all dance it out, and you got to give your jacket up at the end of the battle, but everybody went home alive, right? And then this whole gangster rap narrative. Now, I will say this. There was an area, and there was a time in hip hop where a lot of the labels were independent, right? And a lot of these labels, they were promoting their music independently outside of major distributors. And something changed. And around 1996, 1997, after the deaths of Tupac and Biggie, these major distributors came in and they bought all these independent companies, right? And they pushed these. And if you wanted to get your album released now, you had to get it through Time Warner, one of these major release companies. So what that did, that kind of put a stranglehold on the artists, right? Even for the ones that wanted to continue making songs about what they were seeing, it was all about the marketing aspect, right? And advertising. So there's a perfect example is you see a talented artist that never gets no airtime, and you're like, nobody hear this dude, right? And we deal with this all the time as
Right.
we hip hop heads. We always got that one artist be like, bro, you heard this dude? He's fire, right? And nobody began to recognize this dude. And then you got dudes like 6ix9ine, right? Certified cornball, and he got 1 million streams. He's triple platinum, whatever. And you're like, who's listening to this? Right? So then you get the idea of the studio gangster, the concept of the studio gangster, right? And these studio gangsters are people that the record companies, right? These major record companies create, right? They're characters, they're archetypes. They create them, right? And they give them an image. And a lot of time they might even write the music for them, or they have a ghostwriter that come and writes the music for them, right?
They act it out.
And all they have to do is play the role. So they get in front of the camera, they get them the jury. A lot of people don't know, but a lot of these rappers in these videos are renting the cars. They're renting the jury. They're renting the women, right? So they're just portraying an image that they're not necessarily living, right? A lot of these rappers will tell you to go out there and shoot somebody and go sell dope in your community, and the whole time they sending their kid to a private school, right? Absolutely. So the disconnect between what was really going on in the streets and where mainstream music started going was a huge disconnect, right? Because again, when you look at our communities back in the 1950s, 1960s, all our people was wearing minks, nice clothes, they had their jewels, they pearl, everybody was working jobs at the factory that was located right across the street, everybody had a car, marriage was prominent, right? And all those things went out the window, right? Mm-hmm. And with that came the welfare system, right? There came the criminalization of blacks and Latinos, right? This private prison, all these things that broke apart the family structures, right? So one thing I want to look at is, I want to look at this particular article. And this particular article is talking about a lot what we're talking about right now. And it talks about how the same people that own the record labels are the very same people that are the primary shareholders in these private prisons, right? So like you were saying earlier when you opened up on conflict of interest, this is a big conflict of interest, right?
Yeah, it sounds like one.
Because you are a record executive, right, promoting music that directly contributes, or let's just say indirectly, just for the sake of being subjective, right? Let's say it indirectly contributes. You're still benefiting from the contribution that this music is making to society, right? A lot of y'all familiar with the concept of drill music, right? Drill music got popularized right around, I want to say 2004, 2005, where it really started taking off. So did the murders in Chicago, right? So there's no coincidence. Drill is a slang word for shoot somebody, a drive-by, a kill, right? That's what a drill is.
I'm gonna drill them.
So when you have either active gang members or people that are perceiving themselves as gang members making songs on the records, dissing other gang members in a community that's high gang activity, is going to have fallout on the streets in the real outside of the record world. Absolutely. We've seen this manifest back in the day with Biggie and Tupac, right? We've seen how words and how they got perceived spilled out into the streets. Now, whether Biggie and Pac were killed directly, it really doesn't matter. We know that both of these men had beef with each other, right? And they both died over a beef that neither one of them probably even really had with each other. It was something that the media took and
Hyped
expanded
up.
upon. So I'm going to touch into this article real quick, and then I want to have a little back and forth about what I go over here.
Oh, what's that? What's it? The barcode and the behind
Yeah, I'm going to
bars?
scroll down to the part where, because I don't want to be redundant, so I want to get straight to the part where it's talking about. I gotta find the article now, right here. Okay, prison industry lobbyists developing and encouraging criminal justice policies to advance financial interests has been well documented. The most notorious example is the Washington-based American Legislative Council, a policy organization funded by CCA and GEO, which successfully championed the incarceration, promoting truth in sentencing and three-strike sentencing laws. Right? And these are things that were done under Bill Clinton. So a lot of y'all from the hood, y'all say Bill Clinton is your favorite president, right? Because he showed love to the African American community. It was him that implemented these laws. Right? These laws was written under a president that y'all say is your favorite
He signed
president.
them laws into legislation when he was in office. The 1994 criminal crime bill.
Yeah. If the motive of the private prison industry were the good-hearted desire to get hold of inmates as quickly as possible for the purpose of rehabilitating them, maintenance of a 90% occupancy rate will be considered a huge failure, not a functioning prerequisite. So what he's saying in this article is, if jails were really built to rehabilitate people, there will be no need to keep them at 90% capacity, because we will be rehabilitating people, and in the process of rehabilitating, you should see less and less people coming back to jail.
You should be rehabilitating them with the goal of not seeing them again.
Right.
Versus you send people out and your goal kind of is to see them again.
Right, because it's guaranteeing that it's more money for your company, because at the end of the day, it's a business,
And
right?
the recidivism raised through the roof. I mean,
Like 80%.
yeah, it is ridiculous, and I'm a victim of it. I'm a statistic. I'm in that statistic. You know what I mean? So I definitely understand the impact that it has once you leave, and how if you don't do right, you'll be right back in the same
I know.
system.
I'm a statistic too. I had 2 numbers. I got 3 juvenile numbers, right? And I missed a large majority of my life. Where everybody was going to high school, going to proms, I was in commissary.
Yeah.
And it was like I missed out on a lot of things in my life, right? So speaking of statistics, let's look at some of the statistics, right? The total prison population, and this is from 2016. So just imagine it's been 4 years, right? But in 2016, it was at 1.5 million. And earlier I told you it was at 2.3, right? In 2020. So that's 800,000 new prisoners in 4 years. That's a lot. That's almost 200,000 new prisoners per year that we're locking up, right? And if we go by the numbers that they gave us, $100 prisoner, right? That's almost what, 8 million, 8 billion, and we know it's way more than $100 to house an inmate. So now they're making almost $8 billion a year by locking your ass up because you don't know how to control yourself. Right.
And that's not even talking about, back to the word commissary. Like, that's not even talking about the profits they're making off the store that they run there, which is called commissary. The markup on some of those items is crazy.
Absolutely. You're paying $5 for a deodorant.
And to think that they would do that when instead they should be finding ways to give us the things that cost so that we can try to save more money so that when we get out into the world, we have a better chance stepping out. You know what I'm saying? Because most of the time what leads people back into crime is desperation. You know what I'm saying? Situations where they feel like, damn, like they need to make it happen faster than what it is.
Yeah.
Than it's happening for them, whether it's for kids, whether it's for bills, families in a bad predicament, whatever the case may be. I think they need to set people more up for more success when they get released from prison.
Absolutely. The numbers are staggering, right? I mean, of the total U.S. population, 1 in 12 people was incarcerated in private prisons in 2016, an increase of 47% since 2000. So now the number even went up even more now, right? 1 in 12. That means if you know 12 people, at least one of them has been institutionalized in a private prison facility, right? And right now there's 3 of us in this room and 2 of us have been in a private facility. You understand? 26,249 people were also confined in privately run immigration detention facilities, right? So this is another problem, right? Immigration takes these people and puts them in these private prisons, and nobody hears from them ever again, right? Because these are immigrants that don't have the rights as citizens, right? They don't have the family people that go here to look for them, right? If me and you go to jail, our family gonna come look for us and make sure that at the very least we're getting treated humanely.
I've been housed with those kind of inmates several times.
And you see that they get treated drastically different from people that have a family, and that's simply because there's nobody on the outside to fight for them, right? So that's one thing that we could do if we want to bring change is bring awareness that there's people in prison that don't have a voice.
Well, communication barrier. You know what I mean? You got to understand most of the immigrants can't speak English.
Exactly. And they use that to their advantage, right? There's a story now going around how they were giving hysterectomies to a lot of the women in the detention centers, right? I can't think of something more foul than removing a woman's right to have a child. You know what I'm saying? That's foul. You know what I'm saying? One of the fundamental tenet of being a woman is your ability to have a child. Even if you want one or not, you should still be able to have that option. And they're just removing that option to prevent what exactly? You don't want these people reproducing, right? So we're practicing eugenics here. That's a eugenics, right? And you're practicing genocide, right? And they're doing it legally under the auspice of law and order. That's what makes it even more foul. Right? The largest private prison corporations, CoreCivic and GEO Group, collectively manage over half of the private prison contracts in the United States with combined revenues of $3.5 billion annually. And this was in 2015, right? So it's almost double that now.
Big business.
And what do they do with that money, right? Build more jails. Because these companies are international now.
Yeah, and plus the populace that needs to get imprisoned is growing exponentially.
Exactly. Right?
It's like a snowball.
That's exactly what it is, right? They're playing both sides of the fence. You know, let's add poverty to the world, right? Let's bring in more all these, like I said in the last show. It's not the people from the projects that's bringing in the drugs. At the end of the day, that's the end result of it, right? That's where it winds up. It winds up in the projects, in the inner cities, in the communities, right? But that's not the source of it. That's not where it comes from, right? And when you know that the people that own these record labels, right, are the same ones buying prisons, are the same ones that buy the politicians, are the same ones in cahoots with the government, you see that it's all the same people at the top of all these different things. It's the same group of people, right? So we could say objectively, right, whether you believe a conspiracy or not, we can see that a conspiracy is actually being taken place, right? So let me go back to this article real quick. Likewise, the largest rise in incarceration that this country has ever seen precisely with the early 80s prison privatization, So the largest rise in private prisons was in the early 80s, which happened exactly at the time that crack made this large influx into the inner cities, right? The two went together.
The war on drugs.
We're going to build private prisons, and we're going to guarantee they're going to stay full because we got this new drug called crack that we're going to use to flood the inner cities. That's how they knew that they can make that bold statement, we need to have it 90% full. Because they already have the method that's going to make sure it stays full. Everybody's going to be selling crack. Everybody's going to be on crack, right? And that's the concept behind it. And when the crack game fizzled out, they went right back to the heroin, right? They always got a contingency plan in place, right? You see when crack fizzled out in like 2004, 2005, right? Let's bring heroin back. Heroin working just as good. But now it hit the white communities, right? So now what they had to do was portray it as a mental health issue, right? Because then it would have been a situation where, why you not locking these people up in the suburbs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the hypocrisy that we find when we're dealing with these people, okay? This despite the fact that crime rates actually declined since this time. This decreasing crime rate was pointed out enthusiastically by skeptics eager to debunk last year's anonymous industry insider who painted a picture of popularized hip-hop as a tool for imprisoning the masses. What wasn't pointed out was despite crime rates going down, incarceration rates have skyrocketed. While the size of the prison population changed dramatically, so did its complexion. In All Eyes on Me, America's War on Drugs and the Prison Industrial Complex, Andre Douglas Cummings documents the obvious truth that the vast majority of the prisoner increase in the United States has come from the African American and Latino citizen drug arrests. Okay? 58% of the prison population is Black and Latinos, yet we make up only 13% of the population, right? When you look at the crime statistics, right, outside of shooting, white people are number one in every category. Most notably, child pedophilia, sexual molestation, and rape. Okay? But yet, 58% of the prisoners are black and Latinos for low-level drug offenses and things like that. So we're talking about save the children, right? But a lot of times we let the child pedophilia walk because of the color of his skin, and we'll lock up the drug dealer, right? Now, I'm not saying that a drug dealer is morally superior, right? But when you weigh in the options, right, of whose crime is worse, right? And then you got to really be objective and really like, do you want to let the pedophile walk loose, right? And now, granted, this is a little bit deeper than a racial thing. It's a philosophical thing too, right? Because this country was built on manifest destiny. And if any, I'm going to do a whole show on manifest destiny. And manifest destiny is the belief that a certain group of people were coming here to America to build a certain type of society that didn't encompass people of color.
Absolutely.
And for whatever reason, right, we tend to believe that this country was built with the thought of us as equal, and it wasn't. Right? So when we get into the show about manifest destiny, I'm going to show you what this country was, the principles this country was really built upon.
The same thing that the Constitution was based upon. You know what I'm saying? Oppressing and keeping people of color outside of the lanes of success. That's pretty much all it is, man. I mean, it's not hard to see, especially when you in the prisons, man. It's crazy when you actually sit back and you inside one of these prisons and you see the complexion of the population. All you see is black and brown all around you. And I mean, all you see is either they African American or they some type of Latino. Is there a population of whites? I'm not saying there's no whites locked up at all, but what I'm saying is in comparison, I mean, it'll just leave you like you'll be stunned.
And you know what that does? It creates a level of distrust, right? It creates a level, because now when you walking in the street, right, you subconsciously you got that level of distrust for your own kind of people, and it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't walk down the street looking at somebody that's the same as you as your enemy, as an op, right? That's the word that the youngins like to use now, right?
Op, as an op.
You should look at them as, yo, you my kinfolk, you my peoples. You know what I'm saying? But that's not how we look at people. We see them and we automatically think, is this dude gonna rob me? Or is he trying to come up on me, right? And so it creates a level of distrust because we get programmed seeing all these black and brown faces in prison, and we start to believe this is our reality. And it's not our reality. History clearly shows this is not our reality, right? You know, all the knowledge and all these things that these Europeans gave us, they got it from African sources. I'm gonna get into all of that. You know what I'm saying? But we forgot our history, right? And it was replaced with an alternative history, right? And you know, now we have an alternative reality. But on a more positive note, right, now that we've overcame all of this, right, and now that these things like this are behind us, what positive things that you got going on in your life now moving forward? I know you got a lot of events going on, and I know you like to do things for the community. So if you could share with the people on a more positive note, you know, what you got going on, and real briefly how you managed to overcome this after you came home, man, because, you know, you came home and you got right, like you ain't missed a step, you know, and I'm really proud of you for that. So I want you to share that with the people.
You know, coming home, man, my mentality, I'm not gonna lie, like I kind of had told I first and foremost, I was gone for a little over 5 years. In 5 years, you have a lot of time to think. You know what I'm saying? So in that time, man, I just decided that I no longer was gonna give bad energy to anything. I don't care what it is, man, whether it's people, whether it's women, whether it's events, whether it's people who I associate with. And I say that to say that a lot of great relationships that I happened to build before I went in, they kind of they was just like, yo, like, we see your potential. You know what I mean? Stay in this lane, do what you're supposed to do, and you're gonna be able to create a lot of opportunities for people. You just have to stay out your own way. And I think that's a lot of our own problems in life, period, as general and people. I think we just be in our own way. I think sometimes we give too much attention and time to things we don't need to, and we give too little time and effort into things that we should be giving time and effort to. You know, moving forward, man, I'm real into youth outreach. I eventually want to get into that. As you know, we just had the Sip and Splash event. We just had another event down at Lotus Lounge like last Friday, I believe. Both of them was very successful.
And make sure y'all attend these events too, because I went to a few of these events and it's definitely a good time. And it's a peaceful atmosphere too. It's not like those kind of vibes where you go somewhere and there's all type of shenanigans. It's a very, very chill. I personally could vouch for that.
Good luck, and I appreciate it. And that's one thing we try to accomplish in all our events, man. First and foremost, people's safety. We understand when you come out, you want to be safe. You don't want to worry about dodging no bullets. You
Right.
don't want to worry about people fighting and arguing. So we pay very, very much a lot of attention to that. Another thing we pay attention to is diversity, man. We try to make our crowds. We strive to make our crowds the most diverse in the city, period. Like,
Absolutely.
that's one thing we work for. Me being Puerto Rican, absolutely love my culture, love my people. And then me being obviously very, very deep into the hip hop culture and just growing up in New York City, all of my friends quite naturally have always been either black or
Right,
Puerto
right.
Rican or Latino. It's never been nothing else.
Right.
So, I always try to have a reflection of that in my crowds. I try my crowds to reflect my circle, and my
Yeah,
circle
yeah.
is very diverse.
And they're very diverse, and then you meet a wide range of people.
Yeah.
And I've always had a good time every event. So one question I want to ask you before I get ready to wrap it up: if you could talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, understanding the things that you know now, right? What would you say to yourself at 18?
Man, patience, young boy, patience, man. I think most of the time I've put myself in situations trying to get to a goal faster than it was meant to be. I think sometimes as a people now, especially with social media and the culture that they shoving down our throats, everything is, like you said earlier, instant gratification.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think we want everything now, like
the
at
now,
the
now,
moment.
now.
I don't want to wait. I don't want to save up for 5-6 months and then buy them. Like, I want it right now. And I think that was my problem earlier on. I was always rushing to get to a goal. Instead of enjoying the moment, man, enjoying the process of watching it grow, of building it from the ground up, of just seeing the evolution of your growth in whatever stage in life you in.
That's
So
good.
I think that's what I would have told myself off top is just enjoy the moments, man. Be patient and just continue working hard, man, and let your work speak for itself and don't get caught up in the BS.
And being able to do and this is something that I wanted to touch on. I touched on my first show. Getting the opportunity to do things like this, right? Even if it's just a simple sit and build a podcast. This is a man that I've known 20 years. 20 plus years, and both of our lives could have went in a totally different direction. Either one of us could be dead or in jail doing forever and a day, right?
Word.
But we're not. We had the opportunity. We was fortunate to wake up, right? And we were blessed with the ability of discernment to understand when a finesse is being ran on us and separate ourselves from that shit. So when I do things like this, it's really it's gratifying for me. When you talk about instant gratification, being able to do this is instant gratification, right? Because I get to do this with somebody that I've known, quite frankly, almost all my life. You know what I'm saying?
Word.
And this is something that we could do more. What I'm trying to do with this show is we got to save ourselves. And there's nothing coming out of the sky to save us. There's no superhero coming to save us. The responsibility of saving ourselves and our community lies on us. You know what I'm saying? And us being men of the community, right? Our job is protectors and educators and whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that we leave in a better world for our children than the world we came into. So, moving forward, I'm going to be touching on a wide range of topics. And a lot of these topics are not necessarily going to be things that you want to hear, but they're going to be things that you need to hear. Because for a long time, we've been, we've had our hands like this over our ears, right? And our hands like this over our eyes and our hands like this over our mouth.
But that's what we taught. You know what I mean? What we
Yeah.
taught growing up, like, mind your business. Go about your bit. If you see some and they don't have nothing to do with you, keep walking, keep going. You know what I'm saying? Instead of checking the problem and holding people accountable. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
and most importantly, man, I want to say, like, even this platform here, man, this is dope. I see a lot of people, man, on here, man, and I want to shout out some of the people that's on here actually taking time, man, listening, trying to make yourself better through several streams of information.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying neither him nor I have all the answers to everything, but just being able to just be diverse in the things you listen to and the perspectives, I think that just makes you a better person overall.
Yeah. And like I said, this is a forum that's available for everyone. You know what I'm saying? I don't, you don't have to agree with anything I say. All I'm trying to do is get you to use your brain, right, and use it to think, because that's something that we don't do too much as people no more. We just take everything at face value, and we got to stop doing that. We got to stop doing it with information, and we got to stop doing it with people. You know what I'm saying? Investigate everything and find out. Like the question that I'm gonna ask y'all before I wrap it up today is, how well do you really know the people that you know? And think about this. You know what I'm saying? How well do you really know the people that you know, whether it be friends or family members, right? Or how well do you know yourself, right? And these are things that we're gonna get into all of this moving forward with the show. So with that being said, I want to thank my homie Bully for coming out. I appreciate you. You did a wonderful job, man.
Appreciate all y'all, man. Tuned in the comments. Y'all lit in here, man. Make sure y'all check out the next event, man. I appreciate you having me today.
His IG information is there. You can switch it back to his screen real quick so people can get the
Bully
IG
Bag
information.
Poppy, at Bully Bag Poppy, right on the screen, man. And follow out at Loud House Vibes. You know what I mean? That's our event page, man. So all our upcoming events and everything. I'll be posting them, but on that page you also get more details.
Definitely. And make sure y'all come out. It's always a good time. And these are events that I'll personally vouch for, stamp of approval. And with that being said, we got some very powerful, hard-hitting shows coming up over the next few weeks. So I want y'all to bear with me real quick as I get everything together. And with that being said, thank you for coming out. Peace out.